Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kol Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 2, entitled Planting the Seed. We're in the month of November of 1965. And in this month, Srila Prabhupada has written a number of letters reaching out to his supporters. You'd be surprised to know that of all the letters that Prabhupada wrote in this month, 3 of them were to Sally Agarwal. She was his greatest supporter in America by that time. 2 of them were to his godbrother Tirtha Maharaj, who was very far away in Mayapur and was not offering much help. As Prabhupada, he would ask the same thing from all of his supporters, but in the case of his godbrother, nothing was coming through. He was also he wrote 2 letters to Sumati Morarji. And she, although sympathetic, was not in the position to help him in the large way that Prabhupada needed help. So last week, because we ran out of time, we had one more paragraph of the letter, the first letter that Prabhupada wrote to Sally. Now, I consider these letters to be very important because this is actually where we're getting the information where Satsvarup Maharaj was able to write the Prabhupada Lilamrita at this time. There were a few people who could be interviewed, and other than that, Prabhupada's correspondence was there. So Prabhupada had written in the letter to find out whether Gopal Agarwal had sent 40 sets of his books to the Paragon Book Gallery. And then in Prabhupada's diary, which is one of the last entries in his 1965 diary of Thursday, November 11th, he confirms that he received today 25 sets from Gopal. Prabhupada had kept with him 5 sets personally. And there was another bookshop called the Orientalia. That Orientalia was somewhat near where Prabhupada was staying. You'll see that these places, Prabhupada was moving around in New York. We didn't have navigators. We didn't have any type of online searching in those days. If you wanted to find a place, you had a phone book, or you can just wander around and try to find places. And this is what we had to do in New York, even in our Sankirtan days. Just wandering around trying to find the right places. So Prabhupada was moving around, he would walk, he would take buses, and he found these bookshops. So the Paragon bookshop was down in the village area. So he was going down in the Lower East Side, even while he was staying on 72nd Street. And the Orientalia bookshop, that was closer to where Prabhupada was staying at 60th Street. So Prabhupada's explaining to Sally, Dr. Ramamurti Mishra is also a very kind gentleman, and I'm living very comfortably at his care. He is keen after looking my all kinds of comforts. I am negotiating with some booksellers and publishers, and I hope I shall be able to settle something before I leave for the next station. Now, which next station was that going to be? Prabhupada, he opened up his heart actually to Sally more than anyone else. We'll find that in the next letter that he wrote to her. He was contemplating, should he return to India, or should he move on to either, he was thinking of California where he had heard that people would be more interested in his books and his teachings, or to Canada, Montreal. I shall be in New York still for a few days more, because Prabhupada, the next ship that was going to leave, the Scindia navigation ship, the Jaladuta, was going to be November 17th. And now it was November 11th. So he had just a few more days to decide whether he was going to get on that ship or whether he was going to continue with his mission in America. I am so grateful to your kindness, and surely I shall ask you if I need anything. I have left my hearth and home in India, but here by the grace of the Lord, I have got good sons and daughter like you, so I do not feel any foreign complexity, in other words. Hope you are all well and awaiting your early reply. Yours affectionately, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So that was another point. Sally used to reply to Prabhupada's letters, and that's why there was a constant communication going on between the two of them. So now, because Prabhupada is mentioning sons and daughter, at that time he only had one daughter in America, as the years went by, Prabhupada would use that expression quite often, especially when describing his disciples who were helping him. So there were hundreds of times when Prabhupada used sons and daughters in his letters, but I picked out a few from the early days, how Prabhupada used that. I'm so proud to have such spiritual sons and daughters like you, who are so humble in their dealings, but who are so high in their spiritual understanding. So that was 1968, when Prabhupada had already started by that time 3 temples, and he would write this to, usually a combined letter to all the devotees in one center. Although I am overcrowded by so many letters from my beloved spiritual sons and daughters, still if I don't receive a letter from one, I become anxious for it. So in 1968, the devotees had the facility. They were writing to Prabhupada personally about so many things. Later, by 1970, when Prabhupada established the GBC, he asked that only the temple presidents write to him once a month. So as many temples as there were, Prabhupada was answering those letters personally, and he encouraged the devotees to communicate more with the GBCs, because then he could spend more time on his translation work and his traveling. 1969, offer my blessings to all of my beloved sons and daughters who are so kind and affectionate to me. So this is one of the conglomerate letters that Prabhupada would write to the temple presidents or the GBCs to pass on his blessings, because they weren't able to all write to Prabhupada. So he would send his blessings that way, through the letters. 1970, this is to one of his original GBC members, Rupanuga. When I first came to your country, I had no idea how much the American people would cooperate with my Krishna consciousness mission. But now good boys like yourself and all my other spiritual sons and daughters all around the world have been giving me great hope that I may be able to successfully fulfill my Guru Maharaj's plan. I have formed this GBC for that purpose, to keep the devotional standards at the highest level, and at the same time to manage a worldwide organization. So worldwide organization at that time meant about 15 temples. But Prabhupada was very carefully, he was sending devotees to Japan, to Hong Kong, to Australia, to South America, to all over America and Canada. In Europe, he had about 3 or 4 centers by that time. So Prabhupada, because he was very strictly following the orders of his spiritual master, which was to set up a governing body commission for the preaching work, and in that way all of the temples would not be segregated under different gurus. No, it was meant to be all together cooperating worldwide. And then by 1972, Prabhupada started the GBC meetings in Mayapur when they got the land. The last one is, Radha Krishna have been so much merciful upon me, to have given me so many nice spiritual sons and daughters as yourselves. So Prabhupada also mentioned once that I gave up my 5 sons and daughters, and now I have 500. This is in the early days. He has 500 sons and daughters now. So and when he used to initiate us, for instance, I got my initiation by letter because Prabhupada was in Japan at that time. He wrote, "My dear daughter, Daivi Shakti." So Prabhupada, he accepted us as his sons and daughters at the time of initiation. So now we'll go on. The next letter that Prabhupada wrote was to his godbrother, who was at that time the Acharya for the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math, with its main center at Mayapur, and that is also where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Samadhi was, and where the Yog Pit is. And his name was Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Maharaj. So that we can understand Prabhupada's interactions with his godbrother a little better, I just gave a very small introduction of how he came to his Krishna consciousness relationship with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In 1915, on the day of Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj's disappearance at the bank of the Ganga River, Umapati, his name was Umapati, he was born in the Jessore district of East Bengal, Bangladesh now, heard glories of Lord Hari from Bimal Prasad, who would later be known as Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur. In the same year, Umapati took shelter of Bimal Prasad along with his family. In 1918, Srila Prabhupada, meaning Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, completed his vow of chanting 1 billion holy names. Sata means 100, Koti means 10,000. So that's 100 times 10,000, which is 1 billion, Nam Yagya, and established Sri Chaitanya Math at Mayapur. Now, because Umapati had come with his family, and because his father had died at an early age, he couldn't continue his education, and he took a job as a post office clerk to maintain his family. And he was then stationed in Calcutta. So after that, Sri Kunjabihari Vidyabhushan, Kunjabihari was his Diksha name, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he would award special titles to his disciples depending upon the level of erudition and service that they performed for him. So he had a very long title, but he was known mostly as Kunjabihari Vidyabhushan, and amongst his godbrothers he would be called Kunjada. Sri Kunjabihari Vidyabhushan requested Srila Prabhupada to come to Calcutta for spreading the loving message of Lord Chaitanya at the Bhaktivinoda Asana located at Ultadanga Junction Road. This was the first preaching center in the city of Calcutta. 12 years after Srila Prabhupada's physical disappearance, Kunjabihari Vidyabhushan took sannyas from one of his godbrothers. He got the name Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Goswami Maharaj, and eventually became Acharya of Sri Chaitanya Math and its branches. So its branches meant that those godbrothers who agreed to cooperate with Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Goswami Maharaj and remain as members of the Chaitanya Math, those were the branches that stayed with the Gaudiya Math. And those godbrothers who did not accept his leadership, they took their temples that they had established and they formed their own societies. So this is a letter that Prabhupada wrote. Now here, in the Lilamrita, I'll just read briefly the paraphrasing and the description that Satsrup Maharaj has given. November 8th, Prabhupada wrote to his godbrother Tirtha Maharaj, who had become president of the Gaudiya Math, to remind him that their spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had a strong desire to open preaching centers in the Western countries. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had several times attempted to do this by sending sannyasis to England and other European countries, but, Prabhupada noted, without any tangible results. Prabhupada pointed out that there were certain Mayavadi groups who had buildings but were not attracting many followers. But he had talked with Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mission, who had given the opinion that the Americans were suitable for bhakti-yoga. So now, because there's so much information that Prabhupada gives in this letter to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, I've taken the whole letter for us to study. This is November 8th. Pujaniya Srila Tirtha Maharaj. Of course, these letters are written in Bengali, they're translated. Kindly accept respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. Since I have come to the United States of America, I have several correspondence with Sripad Govinda Maharaj. Govinda Maharaj was the disciple and assistant of Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj. And although I couldn't find any of the letters that Prabhupada wrote to Govinda Maharaj, Prabhupada, when he was still in India, he was writing to Govinda Maharaj on the order of Tirtha Maharaj how he could both take help and cooperate with the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math. I should work in cooperation with your holiness, and in my last letter I have already expressed my readiness to cooperate with your holiness, and I had to ask from Govinda Maharaj as to the basic principle of that cooperation. Before I took sannyas, perhaps you will remember it, that I proposed to join you if my publications were taken up. But somehow or other, it was not possible, and we missed the chance. If you remember, those of you who have been listening to these classes, Prabhupada, he had, of course, a personal mission that was given to him by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and that was to preach in the English language in the Western countries. And Prabhupada, after attempting in different ways, first to make money, and that was a failure, second with his Back to Godhead magazine, that didn't have much influence, somewhat in India, but finally he realized that unless he had books, he wasn't going to make much of an impression in the Western countries in the English language. So that was when he decided to translate Srimad Bhagavatam. And he wrote to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj at that time, explaining his scheme, how he wanted to preach in the Western countries through the via medium of his books. Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj replied to him at that time that first you must join us and become a member of the Gaudiya Math again. Then we will see about your publications and about your trips to the West. So Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj was not directly interested in helping Prabhupada with his mission. He wanted Prabhupada to first submit himself to the work of the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math, and then if there was money, if there was manpower, if there was facility, perhaps they would assist Prabhupada in his mission. So Prabhupada didn't agree to that. He said politely here, we missed the chance. Now here is a second chance. And without undergoing a long series of correspondence with Govinda Maharaj, I am directly writing you about my intention. Srila Prabhupada had a strong desire to open our preaching centers in the Western countries, and both Ban Maharaj and Goswami Maharaj, that was Bhakti Saranga Goswami, were deputed for this purpose without any tangible result. Ban Maharaj was able to bring back two devotees from Germany who took Harinam Diksha from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. I have come to this country with the same purpose in view, and as far as I see it, here in America there is very good scope for preaching the cult of Lord Chaitanya. Here the Ramakrishna Mission is there for the last 40 years, and I attended their 2 centers here, and I found there is no appreciable gathering. So these 2 buildings here are the centers in New York City of the Ramakrishna Mission. So the way Ramakrishna Mission got its foothold in America was that Vivekananda Swami was invited to Chicago to a gathering of many spiritualists, and he gave a speech at that time. And simply because he went to America, delivered the speech, and then came back, he became very famous in India as a great world preacher. The fact of the matter was that there was very little influence of his in the Western countries. But simply because he had gone and come back, he gathered a great gathering in India for that reason. So Prabhupada, now that he was in America, he was exploring to see how much influence they actually did have, or was it just talk? So Prabhupada saw that yes, they had 2 buildings, very nice buildings, 2 buildings in the sense that they were right next to each other, and they did their preaching work there. Vivekananda preached for Daridra Narayan Seva, and the practical Americans questioned the Swamijis of Ramakrishna Mission why there are still so many Daridra Narayans lying on the streets and footpaths in India. In America, there is no such scene of Daridra Narayans lying on the footpath, or in other words, there is no question of Daridra Narayan here, because everyone has ample to eat, and there are immense vacant places for their homes. I have not seen a single spot here which is not nicely decorated with good houses and nice roads. Actually, they have built a prosperous country in this part of the world, and so far material prosperity is concerned, they are happy in every respect. So naturally, there is spiritual hankerings, and because India is well known for her spiritual assets, they are more inclined to take something spiritual from the East. So this is the altar inside of the Ramakrishna Mission in New York. You won't see Krishna anywhere. You have Ramakrishna and then his assistants, Vivekananda and Sharda Ma, who's worshipped. No Krishna. So the speaker here he's in charge of the mat there, and on top you have the Om sign. Now, because the Americans were materially prosperous, therefore they had the opportunity to look for spiritual realization and spiritual knowledge. And because by that time, no Vaishnavas had come to America, and the yogis and the Ramakrishna Mission who had come, Prabhupada considered that they were just cheating the people. He'll discuss that. The whole, now this is not part of the letter, but these are some of the things that Prabhupada has verbally explained, either in his lectures or in his other correspondence, his opinion of the Ramakrishna Mission. The whole Ramakrishna Mission is collecting fund only on this rascal plea of Daridra Narayans. We have to feed the people in India. One Swami Nikhilananda, he told me, now the Americans are questioning that you are raising fund for feeding the poor, but when we go to India, we see simply poor men. What are you doing with this money? So Nikhilananda, he was also one of the head swamis of Ramakrishna Mission. We'll hear more about him. Actually, they are doing nothing. They're collecting money in the name of feeding the poor, and they are living just like royal style. You see? Eating all, everything. He belongs to the Vivekananda group because they raise funds from America, huge funds, that we shall feed the poor in India. And they eat meat, and big become fat, these rascals. So you see, very nice people coming to hear the lectures, but they get no spiritual benefit from it. They were simply taking money from the people and not even using it for the Daridra Narayans. They were, as Prabhupada said, getting fat. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mission, this is also not from the letter, just things that Prabhupada described, had advised Srila Prabhupada that if he wanted to remain in the West, he should abandon strict adherence to the Indian habits of simple dress and pure vegetarian diet. Meat and liquor and pants and a coat were almost a necessity in this climate, he had said. Even before Srila Prabhupada had left India, one of his godbrothers had demonstrated to him how he should eat in the West with a knife and fork. Srila Prabhupada never considered taking on any of these Western ways. His advisors counseled him not to remain an alien, but to get into the spirit of American life, even if this meant breaking vows one held in India. So Srila Prabhupada never agreed to compromise like that. He kept all of his vows, and not only he, but his disciples as well. One time when Gaur Govinda Maharaj started traveling on the orders of Prabhupada, he was traveling and visiting places in Europe. The devotees told me this. In Europe, because they have different types of cuisine that's also vegetarian, now it's even become popular in India, such as pizza and pasta. So he was visiting there, and they served Gaur Govinda Maharaj pizza. And he had no idea how to eat it, because it's like a big paratha. You know, what do you do? So they were actually laughing at him because he didn't understand the cuisine of the West. And that was because he was keeping his standards so high, just as Srila Prabhupada did. And when Prabhupada ate also, he kept his standards high. He taught us how to make pakora, samosa, kachori, everything. Why? Because that's the way Krishna eats. Prabhupada didn't care how we ate. He cared how Krishna ate. And he taught us how to please Krishna by what we cook for him. So this is the same Swami Nikhilananda we had heard earlier when Prabhupada was in Philadelphia at the Temple University. He was teaching a course in Vedanta. And when Prabhupada was invited to speak at that class, the first question he asked was, "What does Vedanta mean?" And not a single student knew. So then Prabhupada very clearly described to the students the meaning of the word Vedanta and what the study of Vedanta was for. So Prabhupada, although Swami Nikhilananda, he had met Prabhupada and was advising him, as he had done, that you can't remain an alien in this country. You have to do as they do. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. But Prabhupada did not agree to that philosophy. Now Prabhupada goes on. Almost all Indian immigrants compromised their old ways. But Srila Prabhupada's ideas were different, and he could not be budged. Others may have to compromise, he thought, because they have to come to beg technological knowledge from the West. But I am not a beggar, he said. I am a giver. His intention was not to learn the ways of the Mlechas, the uncultured Westerners, but to teach the Westerners how to do things according to the Vedic culture. Now, we have another example. All of us have heard of Srimati Gayatri Devi, who was the queen of Jaipur. So she once took a visit to New York City, and she was driving in a cab, a taxi. And when the taxi driver saw that she was from India, he began describing to her all the cheap places to go and visit, the inexpensive places. She was a queen. But from that, she could understand that this is the impression that the Americans have of Indians. They're poor, they come to beg, their politicians go, they beg for grain, they beg for money, they beg for industrialization, technological knowledge, that they just come to their country to beg. So, but this was not, Prabhupada was not a beggar. He came to give the most valuable thing to the Americans and the rest of the world. Now, Prabhupada goes on with his letter to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj. But unfortunately, either the Ramakrishna mission or the yogis have not delivered the goods they want, that the Americans want. I had a talk the other day with Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna mission, and he also opined that the Americans are just suitable for the bhakti-yoga cult, and that is also my opinion. I am here and see here a good field for work, but I am alone without men and money. To start a center here, we must have our own buildings. That's why Prabhupada was wandering, looking for the proper building. We'll see later how he was going all over New York City to find that building. The Ramakrishna mission or any other mission which are working here all have their own buildings. So if we want to start a center here, we must have also our own building. To have our own building means to pay at least rupees 5 lakhs or $100,000. That means in 1965, the exchange rate was 5 rupees to $1. Now what is the exchange rate? 85 rupees minimum. So that's how much the rupee has depreciated over the years. And to furnish the house with up-to-date paraphernalia means another 2 lakhs. So Prabhupada was very practical. He knew he needed a center. If attempt is made, this money can be had also. But I think for establishing mutt and temples here, you may take the charge, and I shall be able to make them self-independent. There is difficulty of exchange, and I think unless you have some special arrangement for starting a branch of Chaitanya Mutt, transfer of money will be difficult. You see, because the Reserve Bank of India was very careful not to allow money to go out of India. They only wanted money to come into India. But because if you had an organization, cultural organization, religious organization, that was doing Indian work in other countries, then possibly that restriction could be overcome. So this is what Prabhupada was trying to do. But if you can do so with the help of the Bengal or central government, here is good chance to open immediately a center in New York. I am negotiating with some brokers here. Prabhupada was penniless, and he was negotiating already, who can give us a house, and they have suggested like above. Without our own house, it will not be possible to open our own center. For me, it will take a long time, but for you it is very easy. The Calcutta Mararis are in your hand by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, before he took sannyas, when he was Kunjada, it was he who the very wealthy followers of Srila Bhaktisaranga Saraswati Thakur, they put their full trust in him. That was how the temple in Calcutta, the marble temple, was at Bagh Bazar, was established by his encouragement to the contributor. And many other persons took shelter of him, knowing that he was very close to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and he helped Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati immensely in the management and the financial progression of the Gaudiya Math. The Calcutta Mararis are in your hand by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. If you like, you can immediately raise a fund of rupees 10 lakhs to open a center in New York. But unfortunately, his godbrother wasn't interested because they were struggling just to maintain their own centers in India. Oh, now this picture, remember Prabhupada was on 70th Street, and just a little bit away, Prabhupada found what he considered to be the perfect building, 143 West 72nd Street. So this was the building Prabhupada had decided to attempt to get, to make a temple. And he wrote to Sally, he wrote to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, and he wrote to Sumati Morarji with this one purpose to get this building. And we'll find out what happened to this building. One center started, I shall be able to start many others also. So here is a chance of cooperation between us, and I shall be glad to know if you are ready for this cooperation. So Prabhupada, he was trying his best, but he had his mission. He had to fulfill it. He wanted Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj to help him to carry on this mission that actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had given to all of his disciples. But it was only Prabhupada who took that chance to go to America for preaching in the West. I came here to study this situation, and I find it very nice. And if you are also agreeable to cooperate, it will be all very nice by the will of Srila Prabhupada. So I am writing you directly this letter to elicit your opinion. If you agree, then take it for granted that I am one of the workers of the Sri Mayapur Chaitanya Math. Now the funny thing is, not funny, but what happened later was, when Prabhupada established our Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, because Prabhupada says here, consider that I am one of the workers of Sri Mayapur Chaitanya Math. So then, Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, when he saw how successful Prabhupada had become in his preaching in the Western countries, he sent flyers out saying that, yes, this is the work of Chaitanya Math. And he took the credit of what Prabhupada had done by his preaching all over the world and establishing the Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. They brought those leaflets to Prabhupada and showed it to him. He was astounded. I have no ambition for becoming the proprietor of any math or mandir, but I want working facilities. I am working day and night for my Bhagavatam publication, and I need centers in the Western countries. If I am successful to start a center in New York, then my next attempt will be to start one in California and Montreal, where there are many Indians also. So at this time, there weren't very many Indians in New York. And not only that, Prabhupada was not targeting the Indians. He was targeting the Westerners. And he was seeing who are the most receptive to his preaching, to his books, to his kirtans. And he was realizing that it was the younger people. Now, this is what happened to that beautiful building. You see there? Bikram Yoga, New York City. So not only Prabhupada was looking at that building, later in the 70s, another yoga group, they got that building. And this Bikram Yoga, this is what they do. Bikram Yoga is a system of hot yoga, a type of yoga as exercise spread by Bikram Chaudhary and based on the teachings of B.C. Ghosh that became popular in the early 1970s. Classes consist of a fixed sequence of 26 postures of Hatha Yoga, practiced in a room heated to 105 degrees, that's 41 degrees centigrade, like what we get here in the summertime, with the humidity of 40 degrees, intended to replicate the climate of India. The room is fitted with carpets and the walls are covered in mirrors. The instructor may adjust the student's yoga posture. So here we have the instructor adjusting the yoga posture by stepping on the back of one of the students. And because it's so hot, they're all undressed. It's all complete fabrication, and it has nothing to do with the real Hatha Yoga system. And this is what was going on in those early days, passing as yoga and the yoga science in the Bhagavad-Gita. This total nonsense. So this is what happened to the building. Chaudhary's teaching style was abrasive. Bikram Yoga spread rapidly across America and the Western world, reaching a peak of some 1,650 studios in at least 40 countries in 2006. Chaudhary attempted to copyright the Bikram Yoga sequence from 2011. So what he wanted to do was, all these Hatha Yoga postures that had been practiced since the beginning of the creation, he wanted to copyright it so only Bikram Yoga could teach those Hatha Yoga postures, but was ultimately unsuccessful. And the courts, of course they wouldn't let it. It was a science. It was an age-old science. You can't take that and say that it's mine. So they didn't give him the copyright, but was ultimately unsuccessful. In 2016, facing lawsuits and accusations of sexual assault, Chaudhary fled to India, leaving Bikram Yoga Incorporated to be run by others. So that was the demise of his Bikram Yoga, and the founder, he had to run back to India because of his failure. Now Prabhupada goes on. There is ample scope for working, but unfortunately we have simply wasted time by quarreling with one another, while the Ramakrishna mission, with misrepresentation, have made their position all over the world. Although they are not so popular in these foreign countries, they have made it great propaganda only, and as a result of such propaganda, they are very prosperous in India. So because they went to the Western countries, and then they came back and said, we're doing so much in the West, nobody knew what they were doing. They just said it, right? And they were opening up hospitals, they were opening up whatever they could do, just as we have our wonderful Ramakrishna Mission Hospital here, doing great humanitarian work, that service to man is service to God, but it has nothing to do with spiritual development. They are very prosperous in India, while the Gaudiya Math people are starving. We should now come to our senses. This is Prabhupada preaching to his godbrother. If possible, join with our other godbrothers and let us make an effort combinedly to preach the call of Gaur Hari in every cities and villages of the Western countries. So Prabhupada, he would never give up on his mission. And he was trying to encourage everyone who he could come in contact with to help him in this way. But when it came to India, nobody was willing to help him. Therefore, he had to look to the West. This is the standard temples that the Ramakrishna Mission established all over India. They have one here also. It's always closed. If you agree to cooperate with me, as I have suggested above, then I shall extend my visa period. My present visa period ends by the end of this November. But if I receive your confirmation immediately, Then I shall extend my visa period. Otherwise, I shall return to India. Immediately, I want some good assistants to work with me. They must be educated and able to talk in English, as also read Sanskrit nicely. For preaching here, 2 languages, English and Sanskrit, will be very much appreciated. I think under your leadership, every camp of our God brothers should supply a man good for this purpose, and they must agree to work under my direction. If that is possible, then you will see how our beloved Srila Prabhupada will be satisfied on all of us. This was speaking on deaf ears. He had so many problems, court cases, people, his godbrothers leaving him, making their own maths, making their own associations, their own Gaudiya maths. And he was just trying to keep the Chaitanya Gaudiya Math together as best he could. Now Prabhupada was asking him to help him all over the world in preaching. He just didn't have the facility. Another thing is this one man from each camp. So, yes, he asked Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj to do that. Of course, no one came to help Prabhupada whatsoever. Only one godbrother came, which I described before. One godbrother came to tell us that Prabhupada was not an authorized guru, and he tried to break down everything that Prabhupada had done. Even to this day, some envious members are saying, Prabhupada's not the founder of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Even if you go to, very sadly, to Prabhupada's rooms at Radha Damodar Temple, they refuse to put founder Acharya. They just wrote founder. So some people, out of enviousness of the great success Prabhupada had all over the world, they will not admit that it was Prabhupada who single-handedly, all alone, went to the West, preached vigorously, published 80 books, and was able to establish Krishna consciousness in how many countries of the world? Now we have about 800 temples. So, response was not favorable. Prabhupada goes on. I think we shall all forget now the past fratricidal war and now come forward for a good cause. If they are not agreeable, then do it yourself, and I am at your service. Meaning, if they, meaning the other godbrothers, are not agreeable to help Prabhupada, then Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, you do it. You come forward and help me. Please, therefore, consider this and let me know by wire if you are agreeable. In those days, we used to use telegram, telegraph system. And so that way, within the same day, you would be able to get a message. Otherwise, it could take a month for a letter to come. Otherwise, I shall not extend my visa period, but I shall return to India without being able to do anything tangible at my first tour. So Prabhupada, it took him, 35 days, 37 days on his first tour to finally reach America, suffering 2 heart attacks, undergoing extreme austerity on the boat, and now establishing himself. He was only here for 2 months in America. His first tour, how was Prabhupada going to make a second tour after all those difficulties? So really he was just anyway, anyhow, trying to get help for pushing forward. He did not want to go back to America because Sumati Morarji told him, don't come back until you've become successful in your mission. Hope you will take this matter as very urgent and let me know your decision by immediate return of post or by wire to my above address and oblige. Hope you are all well and thanking you in anticipation. Yours obediently. So no wire came, no telegraph came, no cable came. Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj did write to Prabhupada. We don't have a copy of that letter. But in the next letter that Prabhupada writes in response, will understand what that letter contained. Now is the second letter. On the 8th, Prabhupada wrote to Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj. Now on the 13th, again Prabhupada is writing to Sally. My dear daughter Sally, I thank you very much for your letter of the 9th instant. You can just feel the difference, how Prabhupada was writing to his godbrother, and the affection with which Prabhupada was writing to Sally, who voluntarily helped Prabhupada just out of the kindness of her heart. And I am very glad to note that your little Biju, that's Braja, Prabhupada called him Biju, is growing to be more adventurous nowadays. Generally, the son acquires the qualities of the mother, and the daughter acquires the qualities of the father, and such children become happy in life. You have acquired the qualities of your intelligent father, and your son will be as intelligent as you are, and thus your son will be as good as your noble father. So Prabhupada, being a father himself, understanding the difficulties of raising children, Prabhupada was not fully successful in making all of his children into Vaishnavas. One of them died at an early age. The one who got the most attention and affection from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Another son became actually antagonistic, and after Srila Prabhupada left, entered Samadhi, he made a 17-year court case against ISKCON, saying that ISKCON was a family business and all of the temples and profits belonged to Prabhupada's family. And then the third son, who was very respectful to Prabhupada and wanted to help Prabhupada, the youngest son, Vrindavan Chandra, he wanted to distribute Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada gave him every facility. Though he wasn't very successful, he always remained very helpful to Srila Prabhupada. And his daughter became initiated. Actually, his daughter died in one of the floods in Mayapur. And the whole family was very much involved in Krishna consciousness and ISKCON in Calcutta and Mayapur. So Prabhupada understood very well how difficult it is when you're raising children, when you want them to have high principles. And Prabhupada was encouraging Sally in that way with her son and daughter. I wish that you be happy more and more with your growing children. You can take me also as old Biju, and therefore, even at my ripe old age, I have taken some adventurous task, and as your little Biju requires your help always in his little adventures, so also your old Biju requires your help in his adventures in America. Just see how Prabhupada, it's like a small match. A match can light a fire that can burn a whole forest. So who did Prabhupada have to help him? He had a Mayavadi sannyasi, and he had Sally. And he just, all of his affection, every way he could, he encouraged Sally to help him. She was an American housewife with 2 kids. What could she do? But he tried. Listen to what he writes next. Yes, I am living here in a precarious condition, and I wish to leave this place at any time. There is a room suitable for me, but the lady wants $55 per month, which I cannot pay. But there is a good suggestion for you also. If you be interested in your improvement of economic condition, I would suggest you to start a lucrative business in New York. As you have liked my cooking, so also here, all the friends who have tasted my cooking have liked it. And by this I am suggesting you that why don't you start an Indian restaurant here in New York? I am sure if you start a business like that, you will earn at least $2,000 a month net. This is not a dream, but actual fact. In New York, there are so many restaurants, and all of them are full with customers. So I thought, like that, You should also start a restaurant supplying new palatable dishes, and they would like them surely. So there's a part of New York City called Little India. And you go into Little India, and some people are wearing saris. Nobody wears dhotis, but some of the ladies wear saris. And there's so many restaurants, the Indian restaurants. Not all of them are vegetarian, unfortunately. But Prabhupada, again, he was aiming for that building because he saw that that building could be perfect as a restaurant. There are about 300 items of good vegetable preparations. And if they're introduced in America, it will be recorded in the history of America. People will forget meat eating. It's happened now. I do not say that 10% people in America will be vegetarian, but I am sure that at least the higher section will turn to be vegetarian if they get such nice vegetable dishes. Now, where can you find such a thali as this in American cuisine? American cuisine means meat, bread, butter, and a little bit of vegetable and salad and a dessert. That's it. Sometimes soup. Nothing, maybe 5 things. Here we have, how many, can't even count how many dishes there are there. Maharaj Thali. Why not introduce this new thing in America and help my mission also at the same time? It will be very profitable business, and I wish that you may earn your fortune and help my mission at one stroke. So Prabhupada, he was just trying every way, anyone who could, he saw any spark that he could get to help him. Well, we have to stop now, but after the after the Bikram Yoga had to vacate and run back to India, yes, that building did become a restaurant, a Pizza Hut. So Prabhupada had such business acumen. He could see what a good deal that place was and how perfect it would have been. But Krishna had a different plan. And we'll hear more next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.